A little girl with cancer had one wish: to meet a royal guard. After 15 years of unwavering service, no one expected him to break protocol. But when he did, what followed left the entire crowd in tears. Here's what happened. But before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow at the same time we'll bring you another story of courage and discipline from the royal guards that you won't want to miss. The morning sun cast a gentle warmth across the grounds of Buckingham Palace, its rays catching the polished buttons of Guard James Harrison's scarlet tunic as he stood at his post. After 15 years of service, including 2 tours in Afghanistan, Harrison had perfected the art of standing motionless while remaining acutely aware of his surroundings. Every whispered conversation, every shuffling footstep, every subtle shift in the crowd's energy, none of it escaped his notice. It was this heightened awareness that first drew his attention to a small family making their way through the gathering tourists. The mother and father moved with the careful attention of parents guarding something precious, while between them walked a little girl who couldn't have been more than 7. Her face, though pale and drawn, carried an expression of pure wonder as she took in the magnificent sight of the palace. What caught Harrison's eye, however, wasn't just her evident excitement. It was the colorful knit beanie pulled snugly over her clearly bald head, the way her parents supported her seemingly fragile frame, and the determined brightness in her eyes that spoke of a spirit far stronger than her physical condition suggested. "Mommy, look." Her voice carried across the courtyard, bright despite its weakness. "He's so tall, and his uniform is so red." Her enthusiasm drew gentle smiles from nearby tourists. Though Harrison noticed how those smiles often melted into looks of quiet concern as they took in her appearance, a young mother nearby bent down to answer her own daughter's whispered question. "Sweetie, sometimes people get very sick," she explained softly, her voice carrying to Harrison's trained ears. "That's why we should be extra kind." Stage 4, Harrison heard another tourist murmur to his companion. "Poor thing," the father was saying, "she wanted to see the royal guard before." The rest of the sentence disappeared into a sympathetic shake of the head. Through it all, the little girl's eyes remained fixed on Harrison's post, her expression full of the kind of pure excitement that no illness could dim. Her parents exchanged a look over her head, a look Harrison had seen before in military hospitals. A look that spoke of love, fear, and the desperate desire to protect someone they knew they couldn't save. Harrison had seen that look before in military hospitals, a look that spoke of love, fear, and the desperate desire to protect someone they knew they couldn't save. "Not too close now, Emily," her father cautioned gently as they drew nearer. "Remember what we talked about, the guards have very important duties." But Harrison could hear the catch in the man's voice. He saw the way the father's hand tightened protectively around his daughter's much smaller one. Emily nodded solemnly, though her eyes sparkled with barely contained joy. "I know, Daddy. They protect the Queen, and the palace, and hundreds of years of tradition." She pronounced the last word carefully, as if reciting a lesson she had studied specifically for this moment. Despite her evident weakness, Emily's enthusiasm seemed to give her strength. She moved closer to Harrison's post, her steps small but determined, each one accompanied by the supportive hands of her parents. The morning crowd parted naturally around them, creating a small pocket of space that seemed to acknowledge the special nature of this visit. "She's been talking about this for weeks," her mother was explaining quietly to an elderly woman who had asked about Emily's condition. "The doctor said," her voice dropped even lower, though Harrison's trained ears caught every word, "they said we should do it soon, while she still has the strength. It's her biggest wish." The elderly woman dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "God bless her," she whispered, watching as Emily's face lit up at the sight of Harrison's bearskin cap. Such a brave little thing. Other tourists had begun to notice the family as well. A group of Japanese visitors lowered their cameras respectfully. A tall American man in a business suit quickly wiped his eyes before pulling out his phone to show his wife pictures of their own daughters back home. Parents throughout the crowd were drawing their children closer, some explaining in hushed tones the importance of being kind to others, while others simply watched in quiet sympathy. With quiet sympathy, a small voice rang out, "Look at his medals, Daddy," Emily said, her voice carrying clearly across the Courtyard, full of genuine admiration. Do you think he got them for being brave? Her own courage, in the face of her condition, made the question particularly poignant. Her father's voice remained steady, though his eyes betrayed his emotion. I'm sure he did, sweetheart. Just like you're brave every day at the hospital. He gently squeezed her thin shoulder. Remember what Dr. Thompson said about your special medal? Emily nodded proudly. He said I'm the bravest patient he's ever had. She touched the small pin on her jacket, clearly a token from her medical team, with the same reverence that Harrison's fellow soldiers showed their combat decorations. The morning sun had climbed higher now, warming the courtyard stones. Harrison maintained his ceremonial stillness, but his awareness was entirely focused on the small family approaching his post. In his 15 years of service, he had stood guard through every kind of weather, faced every kind of tourist, and remained composed through countless attempts to break his concentration. But something about Emily, her innocent excitement, her obvious struggle, touched a part of him that all his military training hadn't managed to shield. As the family drew nearer, Harrison could hear more of their quiet conversation. Emily's voice, though weakened by her condition, carried an energy that seemed to lift the spirits of everyone nearby. Mommy, did you know the guards have to stand still for hours and hours? She asked. That's even longer than when I have to stay still for my treatments. Her mother replied gently, her voice filled with both pride and heartache. That's right, sweetheart. And you're just as brave as they are. She adjusted Emily's beanie with tender care, making sure it sat comfortably on her daughter's head. Nearby, a young boy tugged at his father's sleeve. Dad, why doesn't she have any hair? He asked, the question coming with the pure innocence of a child. The father knelt beside him and replied softly, sometimes, the bravest warriors fight battles we can't see. That's why we have to be extra kind and respectful. Sometimes, the father said softly, kneeling beside his son, the bravest warriors fight battles we can't see. That's why we need to be extra kind and respectful. The boy nodded solemnly, then gave Emily a shy wave, which she returned with a bright, grateful smile. An older couple had stopped to speak with Emily's parents. Though their voices were low, they were still clear to Harrison's trained ears. Our grandson went through the same thing last year, the woman was saying, her eyes misting over. The strength these children show. It's remarkable. The doctors gave us 3 months, Emily's father replied, his voice barely above a whisper, as Emily admired the palace's grand architecture. But she's fighting so hard. All she wanted was to see the royal guards. She's watched every video, read every book. Harrison felt something tighten in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced since carrying wounded comrades through the dust of Afghanistan. Through his perfectly held posture and gaze, he could see Emily's reflection in the palace windows, her face glowing with excitement despite her obvious physical fragility. Look how straight he stands, Daddy. Emily exclaimed, edging slightly closer but still maintaining a respectful distance. Just like how Nurse Jenny tells me to sit up straight during my medicine time. Her comparison, between his military bearing and her own daily battles, struck a chord that resonated deep within Harrison's rigid form. The crowd around them had grown quieter, as if collectively holding its breath. Parents lifted their smaller children for a better view, not of the guard this time, but of the brave little girl whose joy radiated throughout the courtyard. Even the usual background chatter of tourists had softened to a reverent murmur. Emily had moved even closer now. Her step still small, but filled with purpose. Mommy? Daddy? She asked, her voice a delicate mix of hope and politeness only children seem to possess. May I please take a picture with him? I promise I won't get too close or break any rules. Her mother glanced at her watch with barely concealed anxiety, a kind of gesture Harrison had seen too many times in hospital waiting rooms. Of course, sweetheart, her mother replied gently, but remember what the doctor said, don't tire yourself out too much. As her father prepared to take the photo, Emily smoothed out her pink dress, clearly saved for this special occasion, and carefully adjusted her beanie. Harrison could see her reflection once more in the palace windows, the way she tried to stand as straight as possible despite the obvious effort it took. just like a Royal Guard, she whispered to herself, trying to mimic his posture. The effort caused her to sway slightly, and her father instantly reached out to steady her. A shift stirred deep within Harrison's chest, a sensation he hadn't felt since his deployment in Afghanistan, where choices between protocol and humanity often meant the difference between life and death. Even as he held fast in ceremonial stillness, he could feel the burden of every regulation, every tradition, every line drilled into him that defined what it meant to wear the Queen's Guard uniform. But underneath all of that, he felt something more elemental, a deeper calling, the original reason he joined the service, the duty to protect, to serve, and to honor true courage when it stood before him. Emily, a frail yet radiant little girl, had positioned herself at what she believed to be a respectful distance. Her pale face beamed with determination as she asked her father, "Daddy, do I look soldier straight?" Trying her best to stand perfectly still, though her small frame trembled from the effort. Harrison could hear the soft rasp of her breathing, shallow but unwavering. In all his years, he had seen countless tourists pose for pictures before the guards, but never had such a simple act been so profound. From the edge of his vision, he saw her parents' faces, faces that carried the unique blend of pride, boundless love, and barely concealed heartbreak that only the parents of gravely ill children seemed to master. The crowd around them had fallen completely silent, as if the very air held its breath. Even the distant hum of London traffic faded, as though the city itself had paused, sensing something sacred was about to unfold. The morning sun caught the polished brass buttons of Harrison's uniform, scattering golden flecks of light that danced across Emily's face, igniting it with joy. And in that singular moment, Guard James Harrison did something he hadn't done once in 15 years of service. He moved. The motion was not casual. It was deliberate, exact, each step executed with the precision of a man who had lived by drill and discipline. A collective gasp rose from the crowd as he turned. Boots pivoting crisply until he faced Emily directly, her eyes widened, round with awe and wonder. Her tiny hand reached instinctively for her father's, but Harrison wasn't done. With the same controlled grace etched into his bones through years of military training, he lowered himself onto one knee, bringing himself level with the brave little girl who had stirred something deep in his soldier's heart. "Hello, Emily," he said, his voice carrying a gentle authority that came not from rank, but from experience. "I couldn't help but notice how perfectly you've been standing at attention." Emily's entire face lit up, her joy bright enough to push back the long shadows of illness. You can talk," she whispered, as if witnessing a miracle, then quickly added with sweet formality, "Sir." Harrison's gloved hand slowly rose to his chest, fingers carefully unpinning the badge from his uniform. "One of his medals," he said, holding it out to her, "is for exceptional bravery in the face of difficult conditions." His voice carried the same gravity he'd used in formal military ceremonies. "Something you know quite a bit about, I believe." Emily's mother had covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming freely down her face. Her father's camera shook slightly as he continued to record the moment, his own eyes glistening. Around them, several tourists had also begun to cry openly, while others smiled through their tears. "May I?" Harrison asked, waiting for Emily's small nod before carefully pinning the medal to her dress. "There. Now you're officially part of the guard." Emily touched the medal with trembling fingers, her face a picture of pure wonder. But don't you need it?" she asked, showing concern even in her moment of joy. Harrison smiled, the first time many had ever seen such an expression on a Queen's Guard's face. "I think you've earned it more than I have." He straightened his posture, still on one knee. "Would you like to learn the official salute?" For the next few moments, the crowd watched in emotional silence as Harrison guided Emily's small hand through the proper motion. Her face was a study in concentration, despite her obvious fatigue. When she finally executed a perfect salute, a spontaneous round of applause broke out among the onlookers. "Excellent form," Harrison said, his voice carrying both military crispness and gentle warmth. Then, in a move that drew another gasp from the crowd, he opened his arms. "Would you do me the honor?" Emily didn't hesitate. She stepped forward into his embrace, her small arms barely reaching around his broad uniform. In that moment, he wasn't just a guard, and she wasn't just a sick child. they were two warriors recognizing each other's battles. When they finally parted, Emily's eyes were shining brighter than the metal on her dress. Harrison stood to his full height and executed a formal salute, not the kind given to tourists for photos, but the genuine article, the kind reserved for fellow soldiers and dignitaries of the highest rank. "Thank you," Emily's mother whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea what this means." "Thank you, sir," her father added, his hand gentle on Emily's shoulder. This is more than we ever." Harrison gave them a small nod of understanding. Some moments needed no words. He turned back to Emily, who was still beaming despite the obvious fatigue beginning to show on her face. "Remember," he said with quiet authority, "you're one of us now. Stand tall." "Yes, sir," Emily replied, straightening her back despite her weariness, her small hand rising in one final, perfect salute. With the same precision that had marked his every movement, Harrison returned to his post. His boots clicked together, his rifle settled back into position, and his eyes fixed forward with ceremonial sharpness. But now, there was something different, something that every witness to the scene could sense. The guard stood not just as a symbol of tradition and duty, but as a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength lies in knowing when to break protocol for the sake of humanity. As Emily and her parents made their way back through the crowd, tourists parted respectfully, many reaching out to touch her shoulder or offer quiet words of encouragement. The metal gleamed on her pink dress, catching the late morning sun, a permanent reminder that courage comes in many forms. And true guardians protect more than just palaces. And so, as the sun rose over Buckingham Palace that morning, something far greater than ceremony unfolded. A soldier and a child met not as symbols, but as souls, each carrying their own kind of battle, each reminding the world what honor truly means. The Queen's Guard returned to his post. His stance, sharp as ever. His duty, unwavering. But now, behind that immovable silence stood a man forever changed, one who had chosen heart over habit, compassion over code. And Emily? She walked away not just with a medal, but with a piece of history. Not the kind recorded in books, but the kind that lives quietly in the hearts of those who were there. A moment not defined by uniforms or tradition, but by the simple truth that the greatest strength lies not in how still we stand, but in how deeply we care, because in the end, it is not only palaces that need guarding, but the dignity, hope, and courage that make us human. The world keeps turning. Duty continues. And the guard stands watch. But for one moment on this ordinary morning, something extraordinary happened at Buckingham Palace. A guardian of tradition and a young warrior fighting her own battle reminded everyone present that while protocol serves a purpose, it's the heart that truly guides us in our finest moments. What would you have done in Guard Harrison's position? When is it right to break with tradition for the sake of compassion? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about the Royal Guards, living symbols of both strength and humanity. Hit the bell icon to make sure you never miss a future upload, and check out the videos appearing on your screen right now. Until next time, remember, sometimes the greatest acts of duty come from listening to your heart. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit like and share it. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring videos. Thanks again and see you in the next one.